In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. As we recently went over blended learning mode, I managed to use a bimodal teaching tool to deliver my lectures. Therefore, this asynchronous online lecture is directed to 5th year grade. So I would like to welcome 5th year students to this video recorded lecture, which has been scheduled in the module of Pedagogy during the course of the academic year 2023-2024. I hope that this lecture would be a good potential for them as teachers, trainees, and at the same time a good opportunity for them to recapitulate what they have seen during the course of the first semester and revise for examinations. So in this lecture, I'm going to familiarize the students with the basic tenets of the approach of self-directed learning by uncovering a set of sub-lectures. This lecture uncovers a set of sections which involve a definition of self-directed learning, cooperative learning, theories of cooperative learning, going over SDL and its relation with 21st century classroom by addressing motivation, metacognition, and self-regulation, going through technology and its relation with SDL, then introducing some of the models of SDL along with Long 1989 model, Candy 1991 model, and Garrison 1997 model. Essentially, the notion of self-directed learning reflects many definitions of scholars. So in order to address this notion, we shall emphasize the words of Knowles 1975, Garrison 1997, and Temple and Rodero 1995. So let's emphasize on the definition of Garrison, which says that self-directed learning views learners as responsible owners and managers of their own learning process. It integrates self-management, which involves managing the learning context, including the social environment, resources, and actions, with self-monitoring, which involves monitoring, evaluation, self-regulation, and cognitive learning strategies. So prior to these definitions, we might understand that the learner takes the initiative to pursue a learning experience. They can hold full responsibility for their learning progress. Once the initiative is taken, the learner assumes complete responsibility and accountability for defining the learning experience and following it through its conclusion. This does not preclude input from others, but the final decision is the learner's. So self-direction does not mean the learner learns alone or in isolation. While in this case, any given learning situation, the critical factor here again is the fact that the learner is driving the total learning experience, starting with realizing a need to learn. Indeed, the concept of SDL is one which teachers have investigated recently. So this notion has its roots in andragogy, which refers to methods and principles used in adult education. And there may be little divergence in how different educators define it, but a survey in the literature on the subject identifies several aspects that are crucial to this concept. So this digest will inquire into the basic aspects of SDL and its application in EFL classrooms. Since learning itself is a social activity, self-directed learning is a social endeavor where students work in cooperative groups with the resources of all group members which are available to assist and help them. And while SDL assumes students select their own learning goals, they therefore must be influenced to internalize imposed goals and make them personal goals. So as this diagram shows, the learning goals of students in order to achieve self-directed learning involve academic goals, social goals, and developmental goals. So let's consider cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is also a notion which occurs only when 5 basic elements are structured into the situation. These elements are positive interdependence, individual accountability, promotive interaction, appropriate use of social skills, and group processing. This notion refers to collaborative work to achieve learning goals and high learning outcomes. According to Johnson et al. 2026 or 226, competitive learning is students working against each other to achieve an academic goal, while individualistic learning is students working by themselves to accomplish learning goals unrelated to those of the other students. So the outcomes here involve higher achievement, they involve more positive relationships, better health and intrinsic motivation, competence motivation. Also, it involves continuing motivation, learner control, internalizing imposed goals, the simultaneous accomplishment of multiple goals, and creativity. So the aforementioned elements of cooperative learning can also serve as learning conditions. The first required condition for cooperation is positive interdependence. The three major categories of this condition are outcome interdependence, which means interdependence and boundary interdependence. In a cooperative or competitive situation, individuals are oriented towards a desired outcome or a goal. In addition, positive interdependence may be created through the means used to accomplish those outcomes, such as resource, role, and task interdependence. Finally, the boundaries existing among individuals and groups can define who is interdependent with whom. So, positive interdependence here as the perception that one is linked with others in a way so that one cannot succeed unless they do. And therefore, group mates' work benefits one and one's work benefits them. The second needed condition for cooperation here is individual accountability. This exists when the performance of each individual group member is assessed and the results given back to the group and to the individual. So each group member has a personal responsibility for completing one's share of the work and facilitating the work of the other group members. So the group members also need to know who needs more assistance, support and encouragement, and also that they cannot hitchhike on the work of others. So the purpose of cooperative learning is to make each member a stronger individual in his right. The third required condition for cooperation here is promotive interaction. So generally students promote each other's success by helping, by assisting, supporting, encouraging, and praising each other's efforts to learn. Doing so results in such cognitive processes as orally explaining how to solve problems, discussing the nature of the concepts being learned, teaching one's knowledge and skills to classmates, challenging each other's reasoning and conclusions, and connecting present with past learning. So promotive interaction changes self-efficacy of the group members to joint efficacy, and individuals can aspire to much more difficult goals when they know they have the resources of other group members to draw upon. The fourth required condition for cooperation is the appropriate use of social skills. So social skills are required for contributing to the success of a cooperative effort. Instances of such social skills are leadership, decision-making, trust building, communication, and conflict management skills. The fifth needed condition and the last condition for cooperation is group processing. Group members need to focus periodically on the continuous improvement of the quality of the processes they are using to achieve their goals. They do so by describing what member actions are helpful and unhelpful in ensuring that all group members are achieving and effective working relationships are being maintained. Also, making decisions about what behaviors to continue or change. Generally, group processing may result in streamlining the learning process to make it simpler, like, for example, reducing complexity, also eliminating unskilled and inappropriate actions like error proofing, the process, also improving continuously group members' skills in working as part of a team, and also celebrating hard work and success. As learning pursues theories, also cooperative learning involves a set of related theories, among which are social interdependence theory and process outcome theory. The social interdependence theory involves two types of social interdependence, which are positive, which is cooperative, and negative, which is competitive. So positive interdependence, which is cooperation, exists when individuals perceive that they can reach their goals if and only if the other individuals with whom they are cooperatively linked also reach their goals, while negative interdependence, which involves competition, exists when individuals perceive that they can obtain their goals if and only if the other individuals with whom they are competitively linked fail to obtain their goals. So, no interdependence, which means individualistic efforts, exists when individuals perceive that they can reach their goal regardless of whether other individuals in the situation attain or gain or do not attain their goals. Subsequently, positive interdependence tends to result in promotive interactions such as mutual help and assistance. Negative interdependence also tends to result in oppositional interactions such as obstruction of each other's effort, and no interdependence tends to result in the absence of interaction. On the other hand, process outcome theory involves the way the goals of a situation are structured, determines determine the processes individuals engage in order to achieve the goals, which in turn determines the outcomes of their efforts. So the outcomes results from the processes individuals engage in to achieve the goals, not from the goals themselves. Now let's consider self-directed learning in the 21st century classroom. Here we shall address competencies such as critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, communication, and collaboration, which determine readiness for working in 21st century environments. So self-directed learners usually take responsibility for their own learning and are lifelong learners. So, according to the aforementioned definition of Knowles 1975, learners or students in practice should take responsibility for their own learning. They should be able to identify what their learning goals are and what knowledge they lack to achieve their goals. Indeed, collaboration, communication, digital literacy, citizenship, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity and productivity are seen as the more essential 21st century competencies. So let's consider motivation, for example, which is generally a psychological factor. It is defined by Long 2000 as the energy or drive or desire that encourages or impels an individual to accomplish a goal or a task. It is also considered to be at the core of cognitive and social development and regulation. According to Deci and Ryan 2008, which are the pioneers of self-determination theory, motivation is a contributing factor, especially when learning complex tasks, when something has to be discovered, or where deep information processing or creativity is involved. So being intrinsically motivated, for instance, would be doing something because it is inherently interesting or enjoyable. In contrast, being extrinsically motivated can be defined as doing something because it leads to some separate consequence. For example, the student does a task or homework just to receive a reward given by the teacher. Intrinsic motivation can be here considered as the single phenomenon that reflects positive potential of human nature, as individuals are also seen to have a natural disposition towards mastery and curiosity. It will influence learning, exploring, discovering, and the seeking of new challenges, and also it will move individuals beyond their capacities. Here we have metacognition, which can simply be defined as thinking about thinking, therefore monitoring one's own thinking and being conscious of what one is thinking. According to Zimmerman, 2013, who is the pioneer of metacognition, or one of the pioneers of metacognition, the use of strategies to organize or transform information can be described as metacognitive activities. According to Long, 2000, metacognition is defined as executive control, as when learners monitor and are alert to their state of thinking. Some of the literature indicated a correlation between SDL and metacognition. So highly self-directed learners will therefore be aware of the cognitive processes they apply in learning, and they will be able to reflect on personal failures and successes. Therefore, when engaging in problem solving, for example, metacognition will be displayed by learners who evaluate and adjust strategies during the problem solving process. Regarding self-regulation as an interesting 21st century competency, according to Long, 2000, self-regulation is a critical element of SDL, and it is a natural outflowing of metacognition. So self-regulated learning is therefore often mentioned when discussing SDL, because both words, self and learning, are included in the concepts of self-directed learning and self-regulated learning. So according to Zimmerman, 2013, self-directed learning is the degree to which students are metacognitively, motivationally, and behaviorally active participants in their own learning process. So here self-regulation or self-regulated learners usually take control of their behavioral and environmental matters in order to achieve their academic goals. Now let's consider the role of using technology in achieving self-directed learning and the integration of technology with cooperation in achieving self-directed learning. Generally, the use of technology has also been persistent in achieving self-directed learning, in addition to 21st century skills. Here we have some theories which are collaborativism and connectivism, which are major learning theories to guide 21st century learning with technologies, which emphasize on knowledge building processes whereby technology advances and augments human learning. Collaborativism, for instance, builds on existing theories such as social constructivist theories of learning, along with Vygotsky, which is also rooted in Vygotsky's social and cultural theory and zone of proximal development in 1934. So those theories usually rooted in constructivism. According to Garrison, 2017, collaborativist theory differs from constructivist learning by locating active learning within a process of social and conceptual development, which is based on knowledge discourse. So both theories are rooted in constructivism, which is based on democratic principles. Generally, technology-supportive cooperative learning environment involves any web-based learning environment, including e-learning, online learning, blended learning, web-based learning, computer-supported learning, mobile technologies, etc. So according to Garrison, two theories for online learning, which are connectivism and collaborativism, they are originally based on self-organized learning, but evolves into network organized learning. According to Simmons, 2004, who already coined connectivism as a learning theory in 2004, by identifying general principles that underpin the theory. So one of these general principles is accurate and it is up-to-date knowledge, which should characterize all learning activities. Here, connectivism is also based on the principle that learning may reside outside us in non-human appliances. And unfortunately, connectivism theory has received much criticism. On the other hand, collaborativism is a learning theory that provides a model of learning in which students are encouraged and supported to work together to learn and to create knowledge or to construct knowledge. So, according to Garrison, most commonly the discourse is text-based and asynchronous, also taking place in a web-based discussion forum or computer conferencing program. So the collaborativist learning theory usually focuses on group discourse that supports and advances intellectual convergence and knowledge construction activities. So these two aforementioned theories are very important theories in linking between the use of technology and cooperation in an online learning environment, which subsequently lead to self-directed learning. Now let's discuss some of the models of self-directed learning. Here we have emphasized on Hemistra 1994 perspective and definitions of self-directed learning, which dates back as far as the Greek philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So according to Hemistra 1994, individual learners can become empowered to take increasingly more responsibility for various decisions associated with the learning endeavor. So the learner usually has full responsibility of learning and is able to make independent choices. Also, self-direction is best viewed as a continuum or characteristic that exists to some degree in every person and learning situation. Self-direction also does not necessarily mean all learning will take place in isolation from others. Here the role of the teacher is required, so we should not neglect the role of the teacher as the role of peers or colleagues. So project work is very important in achieving self-directed learning. Here also self-directed learners appear able to transfer learning in terms of both knowledge and study skills from one situation to the other. Self-directed study or learning can also involve various activities and resources such as self-guided reading, participation in study groups, internships, electronic dialogues, reflective writing activities. So all these activities require project work or require working in collaboration and cooperation and subsequently achieving self-directed learning. Also, effective roles for teachers in self-directed learning are possible, such as dialogue with learners, for example, drills, securing resources, evaluating outcomes, and promoting critical thinking. Here we shall emphasize peer assessment and self-assessment also. So some educational institutions nowadays are finding ways to support self-directed study or learning through open learning programs, through individualized study options, non-traditional course offerings, and other innovative programs. Of course, here innovation, technology, and creativity is very required in determining or establishing cooperation and collaboration among scholars, among students all over the world. Now we have the model of Long 1989. It is an instructional model which provides a framework for instruction. Although most of the other models for SDL focus on adult learning, this model is based on younger students. So the model focuses on the interaction between pedagogical control and psychological control. Pedagogical control here refers to the degree to which students have the freedom to determine learning goals, to seek resources, to set the mode of evaluation, while psychological control focuses on the willingness of students to maintain active control of the learning process. So the aim of this model is when these two forms of control, which are psychological and pedagogical controls, which are equal, if they are equal, or when psychological control exceeds pedagogical control, the situation can be defined as SDL condition, or we can achieve self-directed learning. So here we have four quadrants. Quadrant 1 describes a situation of low pedagogical control and high psychological control, as the diagram shows. This instance or this example refers to a match between a student who demonstrates self-directedness and a facilitator who is the teacher who takes less control of the learning situation. In quadrant 2, a situation of high pedagogical control and high psychological control is described. In this instance, the fact that the facilitator or the teacher controls the learning situation conflicts with the student's self-directedness. For quadrant 3, there is the opposite of quadrant 2, a situation of low pedagogical control and low psychological control, which is also a conflicting learning style, as a student who demonstrates low self-directedness will not be able to perform optimally if he is not allowed if he is not guided by the teacher to control the learning situation without any peer or any other support. So the role of the teacher is required. Quadrant 4 here refers to high pedagogical control and low psychological control. It describes a situation where the student has little self-directedness and the facilitator or the teacher provides a great amount of support. Therefore, in this diagram, we have two quadrants, which are quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, which provide the best matches for a learning situation, while quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 illustrate areas of conflict. So quadrant 1 represents the environment where SDL can occur optimally. Quadrant 1, we have high psychological control, which means high self-directedness, and low pedagogical control, which is less teacher support. Now, moving to Candy's self-directed learning model 1991, according to Candy, one dimension is the amount of control within an institutional setting. In this dimension, at one end of the continuum, the educator has total control over how the content is to be presented and what is to be studied and what outcomes are expected from the students. The opposite end of this continuum represents a state in which the student has total control over the learning experience. The second dimension of SDL, according to Candy, is student control in situations outside the formal institutional setting. So here we have two dimensions. The first one is the amount of control within an institutional setting, and the second dimension is the student control in situations outside the formal institutional setting. Here, Candy refers to this as autodidaxy. In this dimension, the student decides what is to be learned. He decides how learning activities would occur. He decides when learning would take place and when learning activities would be conducted. Also, he decides how learning outcomes would be evaluated. So, the continuum of the autodidactic domain represents the amount of assistance the students has in making decisions about the learning experience, if any. Candy here states that self-direction actually embraces dimensions of process and product. And when we say product, we mean outcome. And also, it refers to four distinct but related phenomena, which are personal autonomy, self-management, student control, and autodidaxy. Personal autonomy here refers to independence, freedom of choice, and rational reflection. Personal autonomy is one of the main goals of education, and it refers to the personal characteristic of a student, while self-management refers to the willingness and capacity to conduct one's own learning. In this diagram, Candy distinguishes between student control and autodidaxy, where student control deals with control over aspects of the instructional situation, while autodidaxy implies learning outside formal educational settings. Candy also discusses how SDL can be seen as an outcome or a process, but he asserts that the development of self-directedness in the student is the goal, with a focus on helping people to develop the qualities of moral, emotional, and intellectual autonomy. The last model in this lecture is Garrison's model, 1997, which is grounded in a collaborative constructivist perspective. So this theoretical model integrates three dimensions, which are self-management, self-monitoring, and motivational dimensions. So Garrison here believes that although each of these dimensions is discussed separately in practice, they are intimately connected. So they are interrelated. This model of self-directed learning also includes the perspectives of SDL as a personal attribute, as well as a learning process. So Garrison explains that self-management involves students taking control of the learning context to reach their learning objectives or to attain their goals. So this form of control implies working with other people within the context and not necessarily independent learning. This also includes collaborations between educator and student in managing the learning situation, and according to Garrison, students should be given the freedom to choose how they would like to execute the learning process. It means that they should ensure full responsibility and should have the ability to make independent choices. According to Garrison, there is self-monitoring. Self-monitoring, which is a metacognition or metacognitive strategy, refers to the ability of students to monitor both their cognitive and metacognitive processes. Garrison emphasizes the importance of integrating knowledge structures meaningfully to ensure that learning goals are being met. Here we are talking about constructivism or social constructivism, because the aim of social constructivism is to create meaning. So in order to do so, the self-monitoring students should show responsibility in creating meaning through reflection and collaborative confirmation. This promotes students' self-monitoring as they integrate external feedback with their reflection. And the students also should plan and adapt their thinking after they should engage in critical reflection and assimilating new knowledge with existing knowledge or prior knowledge. As the diagram shows, Garrison stresses the importance of distinguishing between responsibility and control. Responsibility, which is self-monitoring, and control, which is self-management. Responsibility refers to source educators' need to understand the difficulties students face in taking responsibility for learning if they do not experience control over the learning situation. While sharing control, choice, and collaboration promotes students assuming responsibility for learning. So the diagram of Garrison generally integrates self-management, self-monitoring, and motivational dimensions, which typically leads to self-directed learning. In a nutshell, I'm going to provide some concluding notes that we may come out with regarding what we have seen during this lecture. EFL learners in general are growing up immersed as digital natives and familiar with a wide range of digital technologies. They also may have different learning styles, motivation, engagement, cooperation, interpersonal interaction to the learning process. Therefore, these actualities need contemporary pedagogical models and trends in order to accomplish students' 21st century skills to satisfy their needs and preferences. Also, self-directed learning has been shown to be, or has been proved to be an effective technique for enhancing students' English. So students' cognitive behaviors and actions are formed outside of the classroom by growing their awareness of using both cognitive and metacognitive techniques or strategies to complete SDL tasks. They understand or comprehend how to use and how to manage their SDL by defining learning goals, by selecting resources, and by monitoring their own learning progress. Also, by solving problems and assessing their own learning progress. Also, self-directed learning as an effective learning technique or an effective learning aspect outside of the classroom requires not just student participation but also teacher involvement in the SDL process. The teacher's role as a facilitator is thought to be advantageous and you can say relevant to student learning. So each student requires both informational and emotional input from the teacher, as the students require their comprehensive input feedback during the first session of SDL, and the teacher also must direct them, guide them to appropriate learning resources. Additionally, emotional support or say effective support, encouragement to work harder on the SDL, and positive reinforcement are all required. So this was our lecture. I hope that it would be beneficial for you and benefit from it. And thank you.